Warm greetings, Code Monkeys and fellow VEDSies, and welcome back to CodedLockFilms. We begin the last Q&A video with questions for Entropy. Take it away, Rupert. Actually, before we do that, I do want to address something because I know people are going to be wondering. Yes, the whole little mishap with there being two creepers at once, that's been sorted out. That's all fine. I'm still not entirely sure what caused it. There are obviously a few hiccups in the system as of right now. Anyway, I'm done. Please, Rupert, carry on.
What would happen if you used the stereotype isolation matrix on Trump or his supporters? Thoughts on this year's Pluto flyby?
It's an incredible scientific achievement, really quite a wondrous thing. I have endless respect for the NASA scientists. I won't hear a word said against them.
Favorite comic book movie villain?
Definitely Megamind. He really understands the importance of style.
What tips do you have for aspiring mad scientists looking to find work?
My main tip would be don't give tips to your rivals.
Any idea where the anomaly is right now?
Well, presumably he's off wherever he got banished to. I've been monitoring the situation, of course, but if the anomaly had any sort of physical presence in our world, he would show up on my scanners, so I'm not terribly worried about it.
What has changed this year for you?
Not much, and I'm fine with that. I don't like change.
Is there a possibility of the stereotype isolation matrix spawning different kinds of British stereotypes?
It can spawn any type of stereotype. That's how it works.
I'm worried about the stuffed fish being turned into a hillbilly by the stereotype isolation matrix. Can you make sure that doesn't happen?
That is most definitely not how that works. And what does that even mean, you're worried about the fish becoming a hillbilly stereotype? Well, why? Because hillbillies like fishing? Sounds to me like you're the one who's stereotyping.
After you take over the world, how will you keep it from slipping through your hands?
Over the years, I've become more of the opinion that taking over the world is really kind of overrated. It's just way too much of a logistical nightmare. I think it's much more practical to set out to rule a country or maybe a continent.
If you traveled to a parallel dimension where you already ruled the world, would you try to take the place of your parallel dimension counterpart?
Like I said, logistical nightmare. Let him handle it.
What other gadgets do you have in that fancy suitcase?
What, this one here? I've got plenty of fancy gadgets inside it. But what makes you think I'm going to tell you what they are?
What would you do if your special iPad were destroyed?
Well, first of all, it's not an iPad, it's just a tablet. Not all tablets are iPads. In fact, most tablets aren't iPads. But given that it's autographed by Felicia Day, well, let's just say that if anyone ever destroyed it, they would very much live to regret that.
Would you build a giant robot to take over the world if you had the money and resources? And if so, what color would it be?
Giant robots are generally impractical. They just require too much upkeep and they're far too big a target. And there's almost nothing that can be accomplished by a giant robot that can't be accomplished equally well by creative use of explosions. That being said, it would be green. I like green.
Are your goggles made of Nintendium?
Well, partially. The lenses aren't. You can't exactly see through Nintendium, you know. The lenses are made out of a special alloy called glass steel. And no, I'm not telling you how to make it.
Would you use blackmail to take over the world?
Blackmail's too easy for my taste. It just doesn't require very much creativity.
Did you have any roommates in college?
Of course I did.
Was that guy Psychosis one of them?
Thankfully not. The fellow was quite unbalanced.
Was he a college rival?
Not really. Truth be told, we didn't know each other all that well. You see, I was going to school for 2 PhDs, one for mad science and the other for multiversology, whereas he was focused more on psychology and behavioral studies. So we really only had a few core classes together, and then beyond that, our paths didn't cross very much.
Would you build an exosuit like Iron Man?
There are so many reasons why that sort of thing is ridiculously dangerous and impractical. No. Not interested.
Would you start up an evil enterprise that sells weapons to other supervillains?
I can understand why you might think this would be a lucrative market, but the thing about supervillains is they don't pay for things. They steal them. They're supervillains. You just wouldn't stay in business very long if that was the sort of clientele you were courting. It's just not advisable.
What sort of tools are in your science gloves?
Why do you people hold on to this persistent delusion that I'm going to tell you what all of my gadgets are and what they do simply because you've asked me? Do you not understand the importance of the element of surprise? because I do.
What will you decorate your throne and throne room with when you take over the world?
Thrones and throne rooms aren't really to my taste. I prefer a nice fancy laboratory.
I'm trying to get my time travel gauntlets to work again, but the crystallic fusion tablets inside won't spark. Any suggestions?
First of all, don't mess around with time travel. It often doesn't end well. But I will say that whoever told you that crystallic fusion tablets are a thing was completely taking advantage of you, because they are not a thing. There are crystallic fusion crystals, hence the name, crystallic fusion, but there's no such thing as a crystallic fusion tablet. It just... it doesn't work like that.
With the recent addition of Rupert to the party, it's clear that you have the ability to create life. What are your reasons for this? Are you worried about the consequences of playing God?
There is no such thing as a mad scientist who is concerned about the consequences of playing God. As for my reasoning, one of the first things they teach you in mad science school is that you don't need to have a reason to test a particular hypothesis. Mad science is its own reason.
What was your childhood like?
My childhood was actually quite idyllic until my nana died. And after that, well, things went a bit downhill. I don't want to get into that.
How long did it take to create the racism meter?
Quite a while, actually. That's one of my more complicated inventions, but it's one that I'm rather proud of.
If Jesse touched the stereotype isolation matrix with his real hand, does that mean it wouldn't function if he used his robotic hand?
Again, that's not how that works. Jesse's robotic hand is just as much a part of him as any other part of his body.
Does that mean it's activated by the user's DNA?
No, it's not activated by a user's DNA. It's activated by pushing a button. Or in this case, it was activated by a minor short circuit, making the device think its button had been pushed. It's a developing technology. There are going to be some hiccups.
Would it work on Creeper?
It works on any sentient being capable of prejudice. Which is to say, any sentient being.
Where do you get the money for all these gizmos?
I'm going to let you in on a little something. You don't need very much money to be a mad scientist. Most of what you need for a productive career in mad scientist can be found at dollar stores and at the garbage dump. And for the more complicated things you might need, like sources of power, plutonium, that sort of thing, just steal them from terrorists. Nobody complains if you steal from terrorists. Except the terrorists, of course, but who cares about their opinion? They're terrorists.
Any projects you're working on?
Plenty.
Is it hard to see out of those goggles?
No, it's not hard to see out of my goggles. Why would I wear them if they were hard to see out of?
Do your inventions have self-destruct buttons?
Some of them.
Have you considered using them?
Obviously, I've considered using them. I wouldn't have put them there in the first place if I didn't think I might eventually need them.
If you had a statue made in your likeness, what material would you prefer?
You can't go wrong with Nintendium, of course, but I must say, there's something very timeless about a classic bronze. I really do like bronze.
What's your favorite bridge?
Bifrost. It's a bridge between dimensions. What's not to like? So we got a few questions for the editor as well, but before we get to those, I have been asked to read a prepared statement. Editors ought not to get directly involved in the stories they tell. Editors belong behind the scenes as much as possible. With that said, for the first time in a CodedLockFilms Q&A video, we are including a special features bonus segment in which the editor will address some questions. And here we go.
Can you shoot lasers out of your eyes?
Well, not literal lasers, but I suppose I could make it look as though I were shooting lasers out of my eyes by using special effects, if I wanted to. But I don't want to.
When will you trim your eyebrows?
Why do you care about my eyebrows? Why does anyone care about anyone else's eyebrows?
What is your origin story?
My origin story? Well, I went to school and I learned a bit about video production and video editing, and then I learned some more on my own time, and now I edit the CodedLockFilms videos. I really don't understand what you're expecting. I don't know what you're looking for here. It's not really much of a story. It's more of a series of completely logical and utterly mundane events. That's really all there is to it.
Can you travel through time and space?
Well, I suppose so, at least in the sense that I use nonlinear editing software to create the CodedLockFilms videos, so in that sense, I suppose one could say that I travel through time and space, yes.
How on earth do you use editing software if you don't have hands?
If you don't have of course I have hands. You people do understand that I'm not literally a pair of floating eyeballs, right? The eyeballs are a metaphorical representation of... You know what? Why am I here?
What's your favorite bridge?
Yeah, I'm done. This concludes the special features portion of this Coded Lock Films video. Now, let's just go ahead and move on to something else, shall we?
And now we move on to questions submitted for Creeper.
What's up?
Ceiling, sky, clouds, space. I guess space is down too. If you go in any direction long enough, you'll eventually get to space.
What is the most terrifying thing you've creeped on?
I would tell you, but the government made me sign a non-disclosure agreement before they'd let me go.
Has the curse gotten worse?
It's about the same.
What would your metaphysical world be?
I don't know what that means.
Does your curse only work on human women, or does it work on plants and animals too?
It only works on humans, but it's not about whether they're men or women. There's a whole portion of the female population that aren't attracted to men, no matter how attractive those men are. And there's also a part of the male population that is attracted to men. They're fairly commonplace.
Do you still sleep in a giant bird's nest?
I never slept in a giant bird's nest. You see, what you can do is you can take a bunch of pillows and you can make a ring of them like a big donut made of pillows. And then you put a bunch of blankets and comforters on top of it, and it makes this kind of upside-down dome shape. It's really comfy.
What's your favorite meal of the day?
Probably breakfast, although I do like second breakfast as well.
What books do you like to read?
I don't read a lot of books. I mostly read magazines. Jesse says I'm not supposed to hold them up in front of the camera.
Damn right you're not.
How many Padawans have you had?
I haven't had any.
Oh heavens, such terribly uncouth language in this question. Very well, here we go. Boobies?
Boobies.
What are your favorite hiding spots?
I don't know, pretty much anywhere really. It depends on the room.
What do you think of Rupert?
He's cool. He makes good crumpets.
Ever think about getting a new hoodie?
What's wrong with this one?
Will you stop parking outside my window?
I don't have a car or a driver's license, so that's not me parking outside your window. I don't really know who it might be, but given that they're parking outside a window, it's probably one of the Weasleys.
What's your earliest memory of creeping?
My earliest memory is when I was about 3 years old and my parents were both in bed, so I creeped downstairs and I took some cookies from the cookie jar. They were really good cookies.
Do you like chocolate chip cookies?
Who doesn't?
How often do the police get called on you?
Depends on how often I get caught.
What's your favorite bridge?
I don't get it.
And finally, we have the questions that you asked of Rupert.
How do you take your tea? Yorkshire Gold, brewed 1 mug at a time with boiling water, not hot, boiling, and with just a bit of milk and 2 sugars. John Hurt, Tom Hardy, Benedict Cumberbatch. Who's the best? The wonderful thing about British actors is that there are so many fantastic options. You don't have to make a choice because so many of our actors are so wonderful. Shame about our pop music, really. What's your opinion on Brexit? Well, I don't pretend to be an expert on the matter. After all, I've existed for less than a fortnight. But I must say the thing that really sticks in my craw about the whole business is this horrifying fear of foreigners and especially refugees. A true gentleman glories in the spirit of cooperation and camaraderie and always renders aid to those who ask for it. And I think Parliament would do well to remember that. If you came to the UK, where would you like to visit aside from London? I'm quite fond of the countryside. It's positively picturesque. What advice have you been teaching Jesse so far? Advice? I've not been giving him any advice. I'd be a terribly discourteous houseguest if I were to just walk in here and start telling him how to live his life, wouldn't I? What's your favorite color? What's a color? Do you wear Rupert's pants when you play golf? Every pair of pants I own are Rupert's pants. And I don't play golf, I play cricket. How eccentric are you? Devilishly. Scones or crumpets? Crumpets, but only if they're fresh. I find scones tend to keep better over time. Bus or train? I prefer a jaunty stroll. Are you excited to see the film Daniel Blake? I haven't heard of that film. Remember that whole thing about how I haven't existed for very long? That's a very unique looking pistol you have there. Can you tell us more about it? But of course, it's an old-fashioned dueling pistol, the gentleman's weapon. Yes, it may seem a bit impractical, what with its poor rate of fire and everything, but for the sort of person who believes you ought to take careful consideration before making every single shot, it works quite well. What's your favorite chocolate? I must admit I'm rather attached to Mars bars, although you can't go wrong with a nice Toblerone. Who's your favorite doctor? I heartily approve of any physician who makes it their life's mission to help those who need medical attention. What's that? Oh, you're talking about the Doctor as in Doctor Who. Well, I must admit I haven't seen the show yet. Remember, haven't existed for very long. What kind of drunk are you? I don't get drunk, it's terribly uncouth. A gentleman knows his limits. But I have been known to take a spot of brandy now and then. What do you do on the 4th of July? I haven't yet experienced the 4th of July. I haven't existed for very long, you see. I believe I've mentioned that. Zaphod Beeblebrox for president? What's a president? Is that like a prime minister? How's your southern accent? I have no accent but my own. What's your favorite movie? I haven't gotten around to watching movies yet. With the spare time that I have had, I've been experiencing the works of one Montgomery Python. Devilishly funny. What is your favorite bridge? London Bridge, of course. What else would it be?
And that is it for this year's Q&A videos. I hope you've all enjoyed the proceedings. And please, come back tomorrow for a special VEDS bonus video. And until next time, Code Monkeys and fellow VEDSies, I will see you tomorrow.